Am I the AH for making MIL either get a hotel or drive home instead of staying with us? We live 2 hours from in-laws, but they still come see us and mostly the grandkids a lot, to the point that I have asked husband to help me establish the boundary of no more unexpected drop-ins, especially unexpected sleepovers, especially on school nights. I believe this is fair, as does my husband obviously, or he wouldn't have my back on this. There have already been a couple times we have had to put our foot down on this, but there are still versions of unexpected pop-ins. For example, the day after asking the kids' sports schedule, they were just there without notice, and yes, of course, expecting to come right over after, which was awkward as we hadn't planned to accommodate anyone else for dinner. Today she texted at 1 p.m. saying she was coming into town for one of the kids' games and asked if she could stay the night. I didn't see this until 3 p.m., but even so, 1 p.m. seems very last minute to me and did give me anxiety. My husband told her staying over would not be a good idea as our youngest has been hard to put down lately, not a lie, and she kind of blew up on us. She hit us with the "wow, okay, after all I've done for you, I'm astonished," and also used her issues driving at night to show how selfish and mean we were being, paraphrasing. I said it's not fair to try and guilt trip me when she knew my boundaries and anxieties before leaving, and it was on her to have a plan and consideration for us. She is now saying we are not welcoming. I think some people might think I am being the AH, because while it may give me temporary anxiety, being accommodating to loved ones is important and we should be able to set aside our personal discomforts for them sometimes. On the other hand, this was not an emergency, this was not a championship game, she has made almost every other game, and if she wasn't sure she could afford a hotel or drive home that night, it was wrong to assume she could stay over when I've been pretty clear how I feel on that. So am I the AH for making my MIL either stay in a hotel or drive home after she came into town for the kids' game? Am I the AH for refusing to take my sister's kids to school after they've been bullying my son? A bit of background: my sister, Sarah, and her 2 kids, Jake 14M and Mia 12F, recently moved in with us after Sarah went through a rough divorce. She's been staying with us for about 6 months now, and we've tried to be as accommodating as possible. My wife, Laura, and I have 1 son, Ethan, 13M. At first, everything was fine, and the kids got along okay. Over the last few months, however, Jake and Mia have been making Ethan's life miserable. They've been teasing him constantly, calling him names, and even going through his things when we're not around. It's been especially bad for Ethan because he's more introverted and quiet. He's come to us multiple times, upset about things they've said or done, and I've tried addressing it with Sarah. Her response has been pretty dismissive, saying, "It's just normal sibling stuff. They'll grow out of it." The tipping point came last week when Ethan told me that Jake had taken his school project, something he'd spent days working on, and ruined it by drawing all over it. Ethan was in tears. When I confronted Jake, he laughed it off like it was a joke. Sarah didn't seem to think it was a big deal and said Ethan was being too sensitive. Laura was furious, but tried to stay calm. I finally had enough and told Sarah that if she couldn't keep her kids in check, I wasn't going to keep doing favors like driving them to school every day. I've been taking all the kids to school since Sarah moved in because her car broke down and she hasn't been able to get it fixed. It's about a 20-minute detour for me, and I was happy to do it at first, but after all this, I told her it was too much, and she needed to figure it out on her own. Now, Sarah is upset, saying I'm punishing her and her kids over something small, and it's not fair for me to leave her stranded. She even went as far as to say I was being petty and holding a grudge against the kids. She thinks I'm overreacting and should just let it go for the sake of family harmony. My wife is 100% on my side and thinks Sarah's kids have been out of line for months. But now Sarah's giving me the cold shoulder and telling other family members that I'm being unreasonable. So, am I the AH for refusing to drive them to school anymore? Am I the AH for telling my mom my husband isn't a babysitter? My husband and I live about 4 hours away from my sister, husband, and her 2 kids, 13F and 12M. They lost power this week due to the hurricane and won't get it back until next Saturday. My sister asked my mom if she can bring my niece and nephew to stay with her this week, and she agreed. She is going to meet my sister halfway now, to get them. We are supposed to be going to a wedding this week in another state, but my husband and son, 5, were staying home because it is too expensive for flights and it is my cousin's wedding anyway who he doesn't know well. It is also a child-free wedding. My sister was going to take her kids, and they were coming to the rehearsal party but staying with another relative in the same city for the wedding night. So, am I the AH for fighting for my husband and telling my mother no? Honestly, I don't even want to go to the wedding anymore because I won't have my husband with me when she inevitably talks about him pushing back to everyone she can there. She is retired and has nothing else to do but cause drama. My mom just called me and asked if my husband would watch the kids instead. My husband is hesitant because he has to work, has to get my son to school every day, and they would just be here. He is just uncomfortable doing it himself. I told my mother I can stay home and help him, but she is adamant I go. She doesn't see the big deal, because they are teenagers that don't do anything, but that is not true. They always complain that they are bored constantly. I know it will be hard for him to handle all 3 for 3 days, plus the pets. My mother is pissed now, because she doesn't understand why we are pushing back. She also got angry because I asked her if my sister knew she was calling me, and why won't she call me herself to ask, to which she replied of course she does, what is the big deal? My sister has enough money to change their flights to come out of our city instead, so I don't understand why we aren't keeping that plan. I just have a weird feeling she didn't want my mom to ask, and now I am split between my husband and mother. My husband is also annoyed, because ever since we got married 4 years ago, she treats him like her own personal mechanic, IT support, you name it. She doesn't even ask, she just tells. And her reason is of course, family helps each other. I didn't even leave him a fork. My brother is 53 and has lived off of our parents his whole life. He's never bought his own car or paid his own rent. He's never even paid his own child support. Our mom died a couple of years ago and his behavior really spiraled. He had always been a violent drunk, and after her death he was always drunk. He also became more and more abusive to our dad. When he was finally arrested, I was able to step in and take care of Dad for the last 5 months of his life. I had tried before, but the fog of abuse was too dense, and my dad couldn't admit his son had betrayed him like that. Over the months, my dad shook free of that fog and wanted me to throw everything of my brother's away. He wanted him to get nothing from him ever again. I didn't toss his stuff, I just put it in a storage building. Dad changed his will to leave the land to my nephew, brother's 10-year-old son, and everything else divided between bro and me. I thought. After he died, I found out that the land was deeded to nephew and everything else went to me. All of the physical possessions that were not the land or mobile home. 20 minutes after my brother found out about Dad's death, he showed up to throw me out of the trailer. He also tried to get into the bank and change the funeral so he could get the death certificate. The lawyer told me I did have to get out, but I was okay to take everything and move it into storage if I chose to. So, I did. Our cousins were happy to help. My kids and husband also joined in, and in 4 days we were able to get 99.99% of the stuff moved out. Dad didn't want bro to have anything, and I left him nothing. Not even a fork. I turned off the power, the water, the trash, and the internet. His car will be repossessed if he can't get it refinanced, and he'll lose the trailer if he doesn't get a mortgage to cover what's owed. He works 2 to 3 days a week making pizza, so the banks may be reluctant. I have a ton of stuff I don't need in 2 giant storage units, but my real inheritance is knowing that I get to watch my brother figure out how to grow up at 53.